What is this, Vanessa?
It is a business expense.
Document forgery consultants? Why, Vanessa?
You're asking me why? Because she was taking you from me. Every night, you disappeared into that library. I saw the way you looked at her. I wasn't losing everything we built to some nobody librarian.
She is not a nobody, Vanessa.
Then what is she?
The chandelier crystals rattled.
Wait, stop!
Two
You must
security
let her go
guards
right
seized
now.
Susan Bennett by both arms. They dragged her from the reading table. Restoration papers scattered across the marble floor of Jones Manor's foyer. William Jones's voice cracked through the crowded hall. But it was already too late. Camera flashes exploded from every direction. A reporter near the staircase spoke into a microphone, as though narrating a scene written just for her. The Jones family librarian arrested on suspicion of stealing priceless first editions. Sources say the evidence is damning. Susan did not fight the guards. She lifted her chin. She found William's eyes across the room. "Don't," she whispered. "Please don't say anything." He stepped forward anyway. His father's hand closed over his shoulder. "Let it play out, son. If she's innocent, the investigation will prove it. And if it doesn't..." But the doors were already closing behind her. She passed the portraits she had spent nights researching. She passed the staircase where she and William had shared their first real conversation. Somewhere in that mansion, behind a false panel in the East Wing library, a truth waited. Not even William could imagine it. Before this story unravels any further, if you enjoy tales of hidden identities and love that survives betrayal, hit subscribe now. This is about to take a turn nobody in that ballroom saw coming. 3 years earlier, Susan had arrived at Jones Manor with 2 suitcases and a letter written in her grandfather's shaking hand. "You must be the new librarian," the housekeeper, Mrs. Doyle, had said, eyeing her plain coat. "The family doesn't take much notice of library staff. Best keep it that way." "That suits me fine," Susan answered. She had trained herself for years to disappear into any room. Her grandfather, Professor Harold Whitmore, had drilled that lesson into her since she was a teenager. "They must never know who you really are," he told her on his deathbed. "Not until it is absolutely necessary. Promise me." "I promise, Grandpa." She had not understood then what she was promising. She only knew her grandfather had quietly built the financial foundation that let the Jones Hotel empire grow from 3 properties into one of the country's largest luxury chains. He had done it anonymously, through a private trust. When he died, he left her the archive proving it. He also left her a warning. Men were circling the company, trying to seize it through forged ownership claims. Her job was to protect the truth from the inside, quietly, so she took the position. She spent her first months learning the rhythms of a house that barely noticed she existed. She cataloged water-damaged ledgers in the basement archive. She negotiated with a specialist in Boston about acid-free paper for a Civil War-era diary. She ate her lunches alone at a small desk behind the reference stacks. Mrs. Doyle checked on her out of habit more than curiosity. "Settling in all right, dear." "I like it here," Susan had answered honestly. "Nobody asks me questions." "Give it time," Mrs. Doyle said. "Somebody always does eventually." Nobody suspected the soft-spoken librarian held more legal power than half the executives in the boardroom. That changed when William started staying late in the library for reasons that had little to do with books. Their first real conversation happened on a rainy October evening, nearly a year in. William wandered in, looking to avoid a dinner party. "Please tell me there is somewhere in this house I can hide for 20 minutes, he said, dropping into an armchair. "This is a library, Mr. Jones, Not a hiding spot, Susan said. Though I suppose it can be both. He laughed, surprised. You are allowed to talk back to me. I have several opinions. I don't usually share them with billionaires. I am asking. He stayed 2 hours that night. He asked about the book she restored, how she matched thread to 200-year-old binding, why some pages needed to breathe under glass instead of being pressed flat. He was genuinely curious, in a way she rarely encountered in that house, where most conversations circled back to money within a few sentences. Doesn't it get lonely, he asked, spending your days with people who have been dead for a century? They are better company than most of the living, Susan said. They don't lie to make themselves sound impressive. William laughed again, softer this time. I will try to remember that. Next time I open my mouth. He came back the next week. And the week after. Sometimes he brought coffee. Sometimes he brought nothing but a question he had been turning over all day. Susan found herself, against every instinct her grandfather had trained into her, looking forward to the sound of his footsteps in the hallway. People are starting to notice how often Mr. William visits down here, Mrs. Doyle warned one afternoon. We talk about books, Susan said. Mm-hmm. Susan told herself it did not matter, since William was engaged to Vanessa Harrington, whose family owned half the luxury real estate on the eastern seaboard. But nothing about the way William looked at Susan suggested a happily engaged man. Vanessa noticed it long before anyone said a word. She noticed his schedule clearing every evening. She noticed the ink stains on his cuffs that matched Susan's hands. She noticed the way his eyes lit up whenever someone mentioned the library. You spend an awful lot of time with the help, Vanessa said one evening. Susan isn't the help. She is the most knowledgeable person in this house. She is a librarian. She is brilliant, William said, an edge in his voice that surprised even him. You would know that if you ever spoke to her. I don't need to speak to the staff to know my place in this house. No, he said, already walking away. I suppose you don't. That conversation decided it. Vanessa hired a private investigator, expecting to find something ordinary in Susan's past. Instead, he found almost nothing. No social media, no family beyond a deceased grandfather, records that seemed to vanish behind sealed legal trusts. It is like she appeared out of nowhere 5 years ago, he told Vanessa. Find hers. When the trail dead-ended, Vanessa decided the truth mattered less than the story she could invent. She hired a forger she had once used to duplicate a signature on a prenuptial agreement. She gave him details about the rare books in the Jones collection and dates when Susan had traveled to academic conferences. I need it to look like she sold these during her trips, private collectors, off the record. That is a serious accusation. That is the point. 2 weeks later, an anonymous tip reached the family's private security office. It came with falsified sales records showing 4 rare first editions sold to private buyers, authorized by Susan's forged signature. I want this handled quietly, William's father said. No press until we are certain. But someone loyal to Vanessa leaked the story before the investigation properly began. By the time William learned what was happening, camera crews were already at the gates. Susan wouldn't steal a paperclip, William told his father. There is an explanation. You care about her more than you should, given your engagement. I care about the truth, and the truth is, Susan has never given this house a reason to distrust her. But belief could not stop an investigation already leaked to the press. Within hours, security escorted her out in front of every camera Vanessa had made sure would be there. Susan spent that first night in a rented room above a bakery, replaying her grandfather's warning. Protect it quietly, from the inside, if you can. She had failed the quiet part. Now she had to decide whether the archive still mattered more than herself. William knocked before sunrise. "You shouldn't be here," Susan said. "It will make things worse." "I don't care. Tell me the truth. Did you sell those books?" "No." "Then who did?" She hesitated. Everything told her to stay silent, to let it resolve quietly the way it always had. But looking at him now, exhausted, standing in a rundown room because he refused to believe the worst of her, she realized silence had already cost her almost everything. "I can't tell you everything yet," she said, "but I would never betray your family, not for anything." "Then help me prove it," he said, "because I intend to find whoever did this, even if it takes apart everyone standing between us." If this story has you hooked, make sure you are subscribed. The depth of Susan's secret is about to come to light, and the fallout is bigger than anyone at Jones Manor could imagine. William began his own investigation. He pulled security archives. He cross-referenced travel dates with the alleged sales. He barely slept those first few nights, spreading printouts across his study floor until the carpet disappeared beneath them. Izzo, assistant, Marcus, found him there past midnight on the third day. "You look like you haven't eaten since this started." "I will eat when this makes sense," William said, not looking up. "Get me every auction record these documents reference, real ones from the actual houses, not the copies security was handed." "You think someone is lying to us?" "I think someone is very good at making a lie look like paperwork." Within days, cracks appeared. "These signatures don't match Susan's employment contract," he told his father, spreading documents across the desk. Whoever forged this never actually studied her handwriting. He hired an independent forensic examiner with no ties to the family. Within a week, the report confirmed forgery, inconsistent transaction dates, and metadata altered using software typically used for corporate espionage. "Someone with real resources did this," the examiner said. William's mind went to Vanessa, though he resisted the thought at first. Then he found a payment from her personal account to an obscure consulting firm, made 3 weeks before the accusations went public. The firm specialized in forensic document replication. He confronted her in the study, laying the record on the table. "What is this?"
What is this, Vanessa?
"You tell me."
It is a
"It
business
is a
expense.
business expense."
Document forgery
Document
consultants?
forgery
Why,
consultants,
Vanessa?
You're asking me why? Because she was taking you from me. Every night, you disappeared into that library. I saw the way you looked at her. I wasn't losing everything we built to some nobody librarian.
Her composure cracked. "You are accusing me based on a payment record. It is a start. Even if I did have something to do with this." She caught herself too late. "Why, Vanessa?" "Because she was taking you from me. Every night you disappeared into that library instead of coming to me. You think I didn't notice how you looked at her? I wasn't going to lose everything I have built with you to some nobody librarian." "She is not a nobody," William said quietly. "And apparently, she is not the only one hiding something in this house." The investigation ran another 2 weeks. It eventually exposed Vanessa's collaboration with 2 executives from a rival hotel conglomerate who had promised her a payout if the scandal destabilized Jones' stock long enough for a hostile buyout. Susan recognized the executives' names the moment she saw them. "My grandfather warned me about these men before he died," she told William. "He said they had been trying to seize control of your company for years. How would he know that? Susan closed her eyes. 5 years of promise finally settled into something she could no longer carry alone. My name isn't just Susan Bennett, she said. Bennett was my mother's maiden name. My grandfather was Harold Whitmore. William went still. The economist who disappeared from public life. He didn't walk away. He was forced out by the same men circling your company now, back when it was barely 3 properties strong. He built a private trust that protected the ownership structure for decades. When he died, he left that protection, and the archive proving it, to me. You have had this the entire time. Hidden in the East Wing library, behind a panel your family never knew existed. I was trained to protect it quietly, because the moment those men learned the true heir was working inside your home, they would have found a way to remove me. You have been protecting my family's company this whole time, and you never said a word. I couldn't, not until it was necessary. And now it is necessary. She led him down to the East Wing library that same night. They passed shelves he had walked by 1,000 times, without ever noticing the narrow seam in the paneling near the reading nook. She pressed her palm against a carved rosette. A section of the wall swung inward, revealing a shallow archive room lined with document boxes, each labeled in her grandfather's precise handwriting. He built this before I was born, Susan said, running her fingers along the box marked Jones Holdings, Original Trust, 1987. I used to think he was paranoid, keeping all of this locked away in a house that wasn't even his. Now I understand he was just patient. He always said the truth doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to survive long enough to be believed. William stared at the hidden room, then at her, something between disbelief and awe settling over his face. How did I live in this house my whole life and never know this existed? Because it was never meant for you to find, Susan said gently. It was meant to protect you, whether you ever knew it or not. The final evidence came together days later. Sealed documents proved the rival executives had been forging ownership claims against Jones Company for over a decade. Claims only Harold Whitmore's original trust could definitively disprove. William's father insisted on a public reckoning. The world humiliated her publicly. She deserves a vindication just as loud. The family's charity gala, already scheduled and attended by nearly every major figure in hospitality and finance, became the setting. Susan stood backstage in a simple navy dress, watching through a gap in the curtain as the same guests who had once whispered about her arrest filled the ballroom, laughing over champagne as though nothing had happened at all. "You don't have to do this tonight," William said, appearing beside her, straightening his cufflinks out of nerves more than necessity. "We could handle it privately, send a statement, let the lawyers clean it up quietly." "No." Susan smoothed the front of her dress, steadying her own hands as much as her voice. "They watched me get dragged out of this house in front of cameras. They can watch the truth walk back in the same way. Quiet got me removed from this house once already. I am done being quiet." William studied her for a moment, then nodded, something like pride breaking through his exhaustion. "Then let's give them a story they won't forget." William took the stage. 3 weeks ago, many of you watched a woman dragged from this house, accused, humiliated, and abandoned. Tonight, I want to correct that. He laid out the evidence. The forged signatures, the payment records, the corporate conspiracy, and finally Susan's true identity as the granddaughter of Harold Whitmore. the man whose quiet genius had protected the Jones Company for 4 decades. Gasps rippled through the room. Security quietly approached the 2 executives and a pale, stunned Vanessa. "You can't do this to me here," she hissed. "William, please." "You did this to yourself," William said. "I trusted you. I was going to marry you. And you nearly destroyed the one person in this house who ever protected my family without asking for anything in return." Vanessa's voice rose, shrill with panic as security tightened its grip. "They offered me a fortune, William. Everyone in that room would have done the same thing in my position." "No," William said quietly. "They wouldn't have." The ballroom stayed utterly silent as she was led away. The sound of her heels against marble was the only noise in a room that, moments earlier, had been full of clinking glasses and polite laughter. As Vanessa and the executives were escorted out, William turned back to Susan, his composure finally softening. "I should have trusted you from the beginning," he said, loud enough for the room to hear. "I am sorry, Susan, for all of it." The ballroom held its breath, certain a proposal was coming. Instead, Susan stepped back. "Thank you for clearing my name," she said quietly. "But I need time, William. I need to know whether you love the woman you found in that library 3 years ago, or the heiress you just discovered on this stage." She turned and walked out, leaving hundreds of the wealthiest people in the country watching her disappear through the same doors she had once been dragged through, this time on her own terms. Weeks passed. Susan returned to a small apartment in the city. She took a temporary position restoring manuscripts at a university library, avoiding all coverage of the arrests still unfolding around the rival executives. She told herself she needed distance to think. Mostly, she needed to know if William would come find her, not because the world now knew who she was, but because he had always known, somewhere beneath the surface. The university library was nearly empty by the time William found her. Just a handful of students scattered among the far tables, the evening light slanting gold through tall windows. He found her exactly where she always seemed to belong, hunched over a manuscript with the same careful, patient hands he remembered from that first rainy October evening. "For someone who claims she wants to disappear," William said, "you are remarkably easy to find. You always end up in a library." "What are you doing here?" "Looking for you, the way I should have been looking every day since you walked out of that ballroom." He sat across from her, the same way he had that first October evening. "I have thought about your question, whether I love the librarian or the heiress. The truth is, I never separated the two. I fell in love with a woman who restores 200-year-old book spines with more patience than most people show their own families, who protected my family's company for years and never asked for recognition. That is who you have always been, whether you were behind a library desk or standing on a stage in front of 500 people." Tears filled Susan's eyes. "I was afraid that once everyone knew who I really was, none of what we had would feel real anymore. That you would only see the archive, the trust, the shares." "I see you," William said, taking her hand. "I always have, not the fortune, not the name, just you. And if I asked you to walk away from all of it, the company, the empire, the status—" "I don't need the empire to build a life with you," he said. "I need honesty. I need someone who chooses me for who I am, the same way I choose you. If that means something smaller and quieter, that is the life I want." "You say that now," Susan said, though there was no real doubt in it, only the last habit of caution she could not quite let go. But you have never known anything smaller. What happens the first time you miss it? The parties, the board, the version of your life where everyone already knows your name before you walk into a room. I will miss pieces of it, William admitted. I won't pretend I won't, but none of those pieces ever once sat with me until midnight, asking why 16th century binding glue was made from fish, just because they wanted to understand something I cared about. You did. That is not a small thing, Susan. That is the only thing I actually want to keep. Susan searched his face for any trace of hesitation and found none. Then yes, she said softly, tears finally spilling over. This time, my answer is yes. He pulled her to her feet. For the first time since the scandal began, they stood together without an audience, without cameras, without titles, only the quiet rows of old books that had first brought them together. When they returned to Jones Manor 2 weeks later, the staff who had once watched in silence as Susan was dragged past them rose from their seats as she walked through the doors on William's arm. Mrs. Doyle stepped forward first, eyes glistening. "Welcome home, Miss Whitmore." "Just Susan is fine," she said, smiling. "It always has been." "I owe you an apology," Mrs. Doyle added quietly, once the others had drifted back to their duties. "I told you once to keep your head down, stay unnoticed. I should have told you the opposite. This house needed noticing you far sooner than it did." "You were only trying to protect me," Susan said. "In your own way." "Perhaps. Old habits in a house like this." Mrs. Doyle squeezed her hand. "Well, no more hiding now, dear. Not from any of us." William's father requested a private meeting with Susan the following morning, in the same study where the falsified documents had first been laid across his desk. He rose when she entered, an old-fashioned courtesy he rarely extended to anyone. "Your grandfather saved this company before I was old enough to understand what saving it meant," he said. "I never had the chance to thank him properly. I would like the chance to do right by his granddaughter, if you will let me." "You already have," Susan said. "You raised a son who chose to trust me before he had a single piece of proof." "That," the elder Jones said, allowing himself a rare smile, "was entirely his own doing. I will take no credit for that particular decision." 6 months later, William and Susan were married in a small ceremony held not in the grand ballroom where their vindication had taken place, but in the East Wing Library itself, surrounded by the books that had first brought them together. There were no photographers, no seating charts dictated by status, only family, close friends, and the quiet love that had grown patiently over 3 years of late evenings and careful conversations. Mrs. Doyle arranged the flowers herself, refusing to let anyone else touch them. "I dressed this room for dinner parties for 30 years, she said, tucking a final stem into place. "Never once for something that actually mattered this much." William's father sat in the front row, a folder of the old Whitmore Trust documents resting in his lap, as though he wanted the man who had quietly saved his company decades earlier to somehow be present for the day, even in paper form. As they exchanged vows beneath towering shelves of restored manuscripts, William took Susan's hands. "I promise to choose honesty over status every day," he said. "I promise to see you exactly as you are, in every version of yourself you have ever had to hide. And I promise I will always find my way back to this library, back to you," Susan answered, steadying her voice against the emotion rising in her chest. "I spent years learning to disappear, protecting a secret I never asked to carry alone. But you saw me anyway, in every version of myself. I promise to spend the rest of my life choosing that same honesty with you." The staff gathered at the library's edges, wiped away tears as the couple sealed their vows with a kiss that felt less like the ending of a scandal and more like the beginning they had always deserved. Someone near the back, one of the younger housemaids who had once been too afraid to meet Susan's eyes in the hallway, began clapping first. Within seconds, the whole room had joined her, applause echoing off shelves that had witnessed 3 years of quiet conversations long before anyone else understood what they meant. Later that evening, after most of the guests had gone and the library had settled back into its familiar hush, Susan found her grandfather's old brass letter opener resting where she always kept it, tucked beside her worn copy of the ledger he had once used to track his private trust. She ran her thumb over the engraved initials, H.W., and allowed herself, for the first time in 5 years, to simply miss him without any fear attached to the memory. "He would have liked him," she murmured, to no one in particular. "Grumbled about it for a week first, but he would have liked him." William found her there a few minutes later, having traded his jacket for shirt sleeves, 2 glasses of wine balanced carefully in his hands. "Talking to the books again?" "Just one of them," Susan said, setting the letter opener down gently, "telling him it worked out." William handed her a glass and sat on the edge of the reading table beside her, the same table where he had once dropped uninvited into an armchair on a rainy evening and asked a stranger for 20 minutes of hiding. "For what it is worth," he said, "I think he would be proud of how you protected all of it, not just the company. Yourself, too. That takes its own kind of courage." Susan leaned her head against his shoulder, listening to the quiet the way she always had in that room, full of old paper and older stories, and now, finally, one that belonged entirely to her. Outside those windows, the Jones empire continued to grow, protected now not by secrecy, but by an honest partnership between a billionaire heir and the woman whose quiet strength had saved his family's legacy long before he ever knew her name. Inside that library, Susan Jones finally belonged somewhere fully, completely, without a single secret left to protect. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe and share it with someone who still believes in quiet strength and honest love. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next story.